Last time on Deconverted Man!
But Deconverted Man, the lobsters are a metaphor for a deeper meaning that you're just not arriving at by using that lobsterist book there. And I think you need to reevaluate it and clean your room a bit.
And now for part 2 of Evidence God Doesn't Exist by Brad, a Catholic apologist.
St. Augustine said that God would not allow evil to exist unless he intended to bring some good out of it.
Oh, well, St. Augustine said it. I guess that makes it true. Oh, wait, that would be appeal to authority. I don't care what the guy said. Just give me the reason why we should think that this is true. So you're admitting that there is evil, but there must be an explanation for that. Okay, well, what's the explanation, and how do you know that that explanation is true?
Now, this isn't some metaphysical loophole that Christians use to escape the problem. Human free will is actually the source of suffering. It's the source of evil. But this explanation never seems to satisfy atheists in these discussions between Christians and atheists. It's as if the idea of the human free will has been poorly explained by Christians.
Well, if you're genuinely honest to understand why atheists don't accept the free will defense, you should ask them. I can only give you my reason that I don't accept that. And I don't think it's anything to do with Christians or Catholics not explaining free will well enough. That's just not relevant. The problem is the God concept that you've described being an everything, omnibenevolent, omnipresent, all the things, right? That God has all this power and cares about us, yet cannot appear to make a universe where there is free will, yet has no pain and suffering. Why? Why can't God make that universe possible? There's all sorts of excuses you could give. Well, he could have, but he didn't, or I don't know, it's mysterious, whatever. But at the end of the day, you're basically left with, this is the universe God created, one where free will exists, and because of that free will, evil exists. And God set it up knowing that that would be the case, knowing that if he gave the humans a test, that they would fail the test, and that therefore everything would go to chaos. Of course, I don't know if that's localized chaos, or if that made the rest of the universe bad. Did Adam and Eve's test, when they failed it, did that cause entropy retroactively in the universe? Or was the universe already set up to fail by the time that God made them? And did God make them as a special thing separate from the rest of creation, since God used evolution for that? How does any of that work? I don't know. But at any rate, however you want to try to make all the science work within your religion, unless you're just going to ignore science like some theists do, there are still questions that are unanswered and, well, unanswerable perhaps. And that is, how can you have an all-powerful being not be powerful enough to create a world where free will exists and nothing but good exists? In fact, the very concept of heaven is such a realm. There's no bad there. There's no sin in heaven, yet there's free will, right? Unless there isn't. That would be the only way to be logically consistent, would be to say there's free will here on earth, that's why there's so many problems. No free will in heaven, thus no problems. Unless you want to make some sort of special excuses and special pleading for the heavenly realm. But why not just make us in heaven, where there's no opportunity to do things that are sinful? We would still have free will, it's just we couldn't choose to do bad because there wouldn't be any bad to choose from. Or does that then not count? It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So that's why the free will defense doesn't work, is because I can conceive of a world that has free will and yet does not have suffering, or at least not as much suffering as we see.
That its importance and its role in creation has been poorly explained, as if it's just been an add-on, that God added it on to the end of creation. And the adverse side effects of free will is suffering and death, but that's not accurate at all. Free will is actually the method that God uses to continue creation and to perfect creation. Allow me to try to explain. What if God did create a perfect universe? Would you follow the effects, the perfection, back to the cause, God? Would you believe in God then?
It depends if God is going to provide the sort of evidence that I require for everything else before I think it's a thing in the first place, which is as follows: empirical evidence, repeatable test, and or a valid and sound argument. God has not provided any of those things to me, so I don't believe in it. I don't believe in your version or anyone else's version, because all have failed to do the things that everything else can do that makes me be sure that they exist in the realm outside of my mind. As it stands, God appears to be a concept of the mind, in the mind only. But if the universe was perfect, then we couldn't have the argument from evil. We'd say, okay, the universe is perfect. What does that mean? I don't know. And those that believe in God would say, well, it must mean that there is a God. But couldn't there be a group of people that say, no, the real God is an evil, vengeful God. And the reason why we don't see any evil yet is that God hasn't yet put into plan what is going to bring about this great evil. Now, there's no argument to be made there because we've never seen evil, but they could still make that argument if that's what their belief was, because beliefs can be argued for or against, and they remain beliefs until we have evidence for them.
And there was no evil, there was no suffering, there was no death. It was just a perfect universe. But then the very next day, someone, maybe you, invents donuts. Does that version of the universe with donuts, does that version of the universe then become perfect?
Well, I suppose it depends on what you mean by perfect. As far as I understand it, perfect would not allow for any invention at all, since it's already perfect. Everything you need or want or desire is already there. There'd be no motive to invent anything new, and in fact, you couldn't because it's already going to be there. If donuts existed in that universe, they were perfect by definition of the universe, and they'd already be there. You couldn't invent anything new at all. It'd already all be there. So your analogy is a false one. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and skip where he adds even more analogies to his already bad analogy, because he just has more bad analogy.
The point here is not that God did create a perfect universe or an imperfect universe. The point is that God is in the process of creating a perfect universe. We are in that perfection right now.
But God said it was good after it made like everything in Genesis. So I guess the word good doesn't mean perfect, I suppose, even though some Christians say that it means that. But I guess they were all wrong. Thanks for clearing that up. So God made a neither perfect nor imperfect universe, just made a universe that's on its way to becoming perfect, even right now, today, and we're in the middle of it. Because God can't just make it perfect because reasons. And what are those reasons? Well, hold on to your seats and get on your face palming guard mask thingy, if you have one, and prepare yourself for the explanation of why we're not in a perfect universe. At last, finally, we get to it. Here it comes.
But the process that he's using to perfect this universe is not donuts. It's something much more amazing. When God created man and woman, he told them to be fruitful and to multiply. And through an act of the free will, Adam and his wife Eve conceived a child. And through this act of the free will, God's creation was made better. When Adam and Eve and all of us participate in his act of creation through procreation, procreation means to create with, new life becomes the instrument that perfects God's creation.
Okay, so the reason why there is evil in the world is, dodge that question, we have to make babies so that the world becomes perfect. What? And I'm guessing it's only human life that counts. Like, I'm guessing that planting trees and getting insects to procreate wouldn't count. I'm guessing that it has to be human life. But doesn't that leave out people who can't procreate? What about them? So they're not part of the divine plan to add more perfection to the world/universe? And what about babies that die in the womb or die in childbirth or die soon after? How did they add to any perfection? What was the point of that? And if they do add to perfection, then is it just the life itself? Is it the moment that the sperm hits the egg that more perfection is created? I need to know the answers to these questions, because if it is the case that making new life, human life specifically, makes somehow the world more perfect, then we could devise a scientific test that would prove that point. All we have to do is get a bunch of sperm and a bunch of eggs and fertilize the bleep out of the eggs. Then we just go crush that, do it again, crush it some more. Well, yeah, we're eliminating the life, but we added more life before we eliminated it. Thus, we should see more perfection. So, if we, make a million eggs fertilized, then that week should be way perfect more than previous weeks, right? Because that's how it would work. We have finally a potential test that we could perform upon your idea. Of course, I guess you could just say that, well, if we eliminate the life, then it doesn't really count. It has to live however long it was going to live. Okay, fine. We'll create the million of babies, whatever, in the lab, and we'll wait and see, I don't know, how long do we need to wait? How much life do we need to create before we'll see the perfection come to be? And what would that look like? Should we stop seeing as many wars or people hurting each other, even though they're unaware of the million babies that we made? Or could this possibly be an incoherent idea that you've just pulled out of nowhere, whole cloth, and come up with on the fly? I don't know. You let me know in the comments below what you think. Do you think that adding more babies will make this world/universe more perfect somehow? How would that work? Why would that work? I don't know. Do they have to be Catholic babies or Christian babies? Does it count if we're making a ton of atheist babies? I have more questions. Wait, no, don't go back to the video yet.
So we can see that free will is oriented towards the procreation of new life, and that new life is oriented towards the perfection of creation. But this only scratches the surface, because every year on March 25th, the very day that this video is being released, we celebrate the greatest act of the human free will in the history of the world, and the conception of the life that actually fulfills the perfection of creation. When at the Annunciation of the angel, Mary gives her great fiat, her great assent, and the Word becomes flesh.
Okay, and it's the Jesus story. We know the story. Alright. Here's the question that I have for you that I don't think you'll answer. I don't think, honestly, you'll answer any of the questions I had, but you certainly won't answer this one. How in the world does Mary have free will? In the story we're given, the multiple versions of the story, kind of like narrowing down which one is the correct one. But at any rate, they all have the same theme. The angel goes to Mary and says that she's found favor with God. You will become pregnant. You'll give birth to a son. You'll name him Jesus. In some translations, it's a different name. It just depends what version you have. Anyways, the angel doesn't ask Mary's permission. The angel tells Mary this is what's going to happen. Now, Mary is like confused, and she's like, wait a minute, how can I have a baby? I'm a virgin. Now, this is the interesting part here. The angel says that the Holy Spirit, which was put in there later, because it's not necessarily the Holy Spirit, depends what version you have, will come to you, come into you for sure, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you, and therefore the Holy Child developing inside you will be called the Son of God. So God's going to send a part of himself, and that part of itself will somehow make a child be in you. You don't get there's no choice there. This is going to happen. This is what's going to happen. God didn't get consent. God raped Mary. Basically. Now, I've wondered where the DNA comes from. Like, did God take some DNA from Joseph to put inside of Mary? Like, how does that work? I don't know. But, at any rate, that's supposedly what happens. But I don't see any free will happening there. I don't see the angel saying, Mary, do you want this to happen? You've been selected among many. You have the choice, so we have backup plans. So if you say no, it's okay. We've got some other ladies lined up. Would you like to have God's baby, who then, by the way, is going to totally die later for the sins of mankind? Are you okay with that? No, Mary's just told, this is what's going to happen. So God rapes Mary.
Without human free will, Mary could never have spoken the words, I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to thy word.
Yes, but notice the wording. I am God's servant. Like, she doesn't have a choice. It's God. And, yeah, let everything you've said happen to me. Like, could she say no? Could she have really just said, nope, find somebody else? The thing is, it's not presented as a question-answer here. It's presented as, this is going to happen to you. And she's like, okay. I mean, she's fine with it, but that's not really giving consent, is it? Like, technically, I guess? But that ruins my whole rape story, so maybe later on she'd be like, #MeToo.
From the effect, we can see the cause. From the end goal, we can see the beginning purpose. And the free will of Mary was the method that God became man and creation is perfected. And this raises a really good question, because if human free will is oriented towards procreation...
Well, before I get into explaining why human free will being oriented towards anything would negate free will, let me go ahead and pause for a moment to say, why didn't God stop the world after Jesus did whatever it was he was supposed to do? Like, was Jesus being born everything that was supposed to happen, or was it Jesus dying on the cross, the fulfillment of everything that was supposed to happen? Okay, so then the universe is perfect. That was what everything was leading to. That was the moment to say, we're done, and the world as we know it. or after that, everything should be perfect because you got to the point where you had the most perfect being come into the world. Yet, after Jesus' death and resurrection, evil continues to exist, and there's no sign of it slowing down at all. What's up with that? Now, let me get back to the whole part of procreation is what we're oriented to. Well, if we're oriented to anything, then that would kind of negate free will because we would want to procreate. Therefore, we don't have a choice in the matter since it's built into our desire to do so. That kind of ruins your whole idea. Also, your idea is incoherent, but keep going.
And the procreation of new life is oriented towards the perfection of creation. And that perfection or that lack of perfection is your excuse for not believing in God. What does this say about human sexuality, about marriage, about children, and about the unintended consequences of abortion?
Non sequitur has already occurred multiple times. I think we are now outside the boundary of all understanding as we know it. We have hit levels of non sequiturness that were not meant for mortal humans to perceive. We're at the eldritch sign of non sequitur levels. We are beyond that. We're so past not following that we can't even perceive reality anymore. That's how far we have left reality behind. Like, we don't even know what it is anymore. We are now one with all that ever could be and all that ever is. That's how far we have gone away from all that is to get to this point. That procreation somehow explains evil. Because without free will, you couldn't procreate. I'm not sure why abortion or any of those other questions would be brought up. But yeah, I guess you'd have a lot more questions if you accepted anything that this guy said as true. You shouldn't accept anything that this guy said as true within the last few moments because the amount of logical fallacies is, I don't even know. It's just too many. I have no numbers. There's no numbers on the screen now. There's nothing on the screen now because I can't. I got nothing. I got nothing to give you. It's just incoherent. It speaks for itself. It is so just. It's out there. Why am I fading away? No, wait. I had more. There's more of his video. No, I don't want a part 3. No.
Don't try to debate about logic or the Bible. Believing in God is a fundamentally illogical choice because you are choosing to have faith in a power beyond what you know.